Welcome to the Workplace Makers podcast. I am joined today by Parker Lee, who is the founder and managing partner of Territory. And Territory does strategy, innovation, transformation, and story consultancy. And so they're talking about how to address communication across businesses. Parker is a veteran of the consulting, technology, entertainment, and sports marketing industries, a broad experience that we're drawing on today. And he founded design consultancy Compass 52 and co-authored The Art of Opportunity, How to Build Growth and Ventures Through Strategic Innovation and Visual Thinking. And there's some cool things in your history here, Parker, that we could dig into around being an agent for a cycling star as well, Greg LeMond, who it turns out was the only American to win the Tour de France, which he's done 3 times. So tell us, before we get into anything, how did that come about? How did you end up being an agent for a cycling star?
An interesting path there. Coming out of school where I studied organizational development, long-range planning, and then I broke my parents' heart when I told them I wasn't going to be president of the United States, and I started singing on the streets in San Francisco.
Wow.
I was a busker. And we became #1 club act in the city, and then national tours, and got on MTV. And I came home after one tour and saw my infant daughter, newly born daughter, who didn't recognize me and rolled over in the crib and screamed. And I said, that's it, I'm out.
Yeah.
And the next day I happened to get a phone call from a dear friend who had me go and interview to work at a little place called Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas.
Oh, yes.
And I became the director of entertainment and special events there.
Amazing.
That was a crazy, weird, surreal experience. My first day on the job, I met Frank Sinatra.
Wow.
And then I was in charge of events, and also there, like Grand Prix auto racing in your parking lot. And I ran into one of the pioneers of sports marketing when it was just starting. This was in the early 80s. And they asked me to come and run their events division, which I did. And I moved my family to Washington, D.C. And I was running cycling events. And the guy who was in charge of the athletes quit and started another business. And they said, well, you're the only person that knows these athletes.
Right.
You've
got a job.
You be an agent.
Yeah.
You're an agent.
Wow. So kind of right place.
Around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, and I discovered that Greg he had won the Tour de France, and then he literally was shot by, I think it was his brother-in-law.
Wow.
In a hunting accident.
Ooh.
And he was out for a year, and he was making his comeback. So I got an introduction, met him, and then it was like 2 weeks before the tour, he goes, I want to get in. Anyway, I ended up flying over to Paris. There was no internet then, so everything had to be done, telephones, and there were computers, but it was, you'd send it to the word processing pool.
Yes.
And so I flew into France, and I got to a little city where he was and met with his father and with him in between some of the races. And then the last day, he comes in front of the French champion, Laurent Fignon, in an Arc de Triomphe in a what they call a time trial, which was very unusual to end the race with that. And he came from behind to win, and I signed him as a client that night on the Paris Hilton lobby desk. And
Brilliant.
Anyway, so that's a long story, but that's how I ended up being a cycling agent.
Brilliant. Amazing. Wow. What a fantastic insight into high performance that must have been, and into how athletes think and what it takes to really work at that level.
You're spot on. It has such interesting relationships to what we do in business. The other athlete I had was a guy named Dave Scott, who I knew from college, and he won, the Ironman triathlon in Hawaii.
Yes.
When it first started, it was a bet among a bunch of guys sitting in a bar. What if we did where you run a marathon and you swim and you do? And they put an ad out there, and people applied. And Dave was one of them. I think he won the first one, and he won about 5 5 or 6 Ironman competitions.
Wow.
And so I found him as a client, and I used to talk with him about high performance. So, hey, are you trained? Are you good? He goes, it's not about how fit I am or if I'm ready. I know when I start that race, if my mind is right for being able to compete and to win. And so there you go. It is in high performance when you're there. It is equally as much in your brain as it is in how you train and what you do.
Oh, that sounds like a great quote. It's equally as much in your brain as how you train. Yeah, what a great reflection. Really, that's what you hear people, we hear keynote speeches on that. It's all about mindset. It's all about
mindset.
Yeah.
Yes.
Get the brain right, and then, the training will come, and the training just supports that mindset.
That's right. It's true.
Amazing to talk with you, Parker. You've also got some experience in the use of social media, and that now feeds into to some of the work that you're doing through Territory. And did you want to talk a little around the work you did for the California State Democratic Party in 2004? And that was quite pioneering there with what you...
It was. I was hired when they said, you know this internet stuff, and you know marketing, and you know politics, and can you come in and help us redo our website? And it's a huge year because there's another major national election, and we need to get the site. So there's kind of this way to do social and get people engaged and have them participate, and can we get the site so you can take funding and get people in groups together to work on projects and things. And so I started studying it, and it was way before we used the words engagement and having groups come together. There was no such thing. We didn't even call it social media. And so I, with others, built a site and then found a platform to manage the back end. And it was fabulous. It went around the different topics you have, from transportation to human relations to economy to equity to et cetera, and let people organize that way, donate that way, find out who their leaders were, et cetera, et cetera. So we built what back then was a cutting edge social media platform for the election. And there was great learning in it. It was fascinating.
Yeah, it sounds so well before its time. We think of the Obama election as being this very large, national example in the States of how social media really organized people. But I thought you were doing it in 2004, so it's really pretty cool. Yeah,
I had the good fortune of going to the national convention, which was in Boston, and because I take pictures and do postings and that stuff, and I remember calling my wife and saying, oh my God, I just saw this guy he's going to be the next president. It was Obama's coming out speech.
Right.
And he just stunned everybody.
Wow.
4 years later.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It all happened.
Yeah.
And there's a story there, and you're very focused on the power of story and in the work that you're doing now. So that's kind of, I guess, where you've ended up as one of the things that Territory does is using the power of story to galvanize businesses and to help them achieve growth. So can you tell us a little bit around where story fits into the work that you're doing and what it achieves?
Yeah. We found remarkably we're kind of a thinker-maker company, or a left brain, right brain, and we found that a lot of the traditional consultancies are really good, and I had clients that say this. They come in, they give us a huge PowerPoint deck. It's filled with words and stats and tables, and they tell us what to do, but we have no idea how to do it. And much of what we do mixes creativity with basically activation and how to get things accomplished, and story is critical to that. We as as humans have been doing this since painting on caves, and story, as you know, I mean, look at the power of tell me a story when we're young, or all the great series of Star Wars or Game of Thrones or Marvel comic books or Lord of the Rings. They all are telling these these huge epic stories, and storytelling is what convinces people to change or to do something. It gives you the power to dream, or how you can create hope, or engage with change, be inspired by change, or bring the emotion around why you will make a decision. People, they find, which I'm sure, is they usually make decisions not based on their head, but on their heart.
Yeah.
And so that's why we continue that. And part of our work is just straight up storytelling. Make it not only clear and compelling, but also beautiful and inspiring. So you can make it visually very powerful, but you still need to have the gift of what are the story arcs, and where is the introduction? Where do you have the sparks that inspire people, and when do you bring them back down a little bit? And then how do you bring it to a coda, to a conclusion, and wrap it up? So it's fun. I get to work with, I don't have that any of those gifts, but I work with brilliant people that are fabulous at that.
And what do you see that does in an organization when they tap into the power of story? They realize that they're dealing with humans with emotions, and they want to make the most of this, perhaps an opportunity that they have, or perhaps they need to solve a problem. What are the situations where they can really excel when they bring story in?
Yeah, it helps people find a path to work together, collaborate shoulder to shoulder, and if the story is not effective, and then that's a whole art in and of itself, then the message won't be heard. So we may all have had, some leader stand up in front of us, and he or she delivers a PowerPoint behind them or over Zoom, and it's not compelling. It's not something that resonates. They don't tell a good story, and then we go right back to work. So we believe in helping get that clarity, because if you send a message and it's not received, then there is no message. So message sent is not especially a message heard or understood. So when it is a great story, when it is compelling, when it is visually clear, where you can just see, you look at it and somebody says, oh, I get it. I can see it. And that's because you've done either the storytelling visually or the storytelling with words that create a visualization in our mind of what you're trying to communicate.
Great. It does sound like you are creating a whole experience. There's the words and the visual that go along with it, so people can be, really, I guess, convinced through that consistency.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It is that. And, we found, now we get into some of the practical, so how do you do it? And there are three, I call them archetypes or systems or whatever, that are known in visual thinking. And you can represent any of these three in dozens of different forms and ways of looking at it. But the first is like an ecosystem. Literally do call it a system. And that answers the question, where am I in this? What is it? So where or what? And Where's Waldo is an example of what a system might be. So that gives you the big picture, and you can go, oh, I'm over in this little part. I see how I relate to the rest of it.
Nice.
The second thing is a process. We've talked about process maps, in and out of business, but it's imagine a Candyland game or Chutes and Ladders. It starts here, it curves here, it goes there, it goes there. So it basically answers the question of how does it work? Or IKEA, where you have the pictures that are either 1, 2, 3, 4, or however they move through it. But those are basically process maps on how to assemble. So that's the second one. It answers the how. And then the third one, which you were just bringing up, is when you're trying to convince somebody, it's usually a before or after or a pain gain.
Right.
Science tells us that when you're trying to convince somebody, if you just say, this is a great bottle of water, and they might taste it and look at it, but if you have something to compare it to, water that looks one color versus another, or a chair next to another chair, people like to compare things, and you can do it by just straight up apple orange, or you can do pain and gain, and you'd represent the pain, the negative part of it, in darker, more sinister colors, or less inspiring. So you put that maybe on your left pane, and then over on the pane of a picture window.
Yes.
And on the other side would be the, bright, shiny, open, and that's the gain. So if you're comparing that will be the, why should I care? Why should I make that decision? It answers the why question.
Yeah.
So really great visual designers know how to weave those into the storytelling so they can effectively get the message heard.
Brilliant. And thank you for those 3 types of story. I think we could all recognize those in different contexts. So that's so the first one you said was ecosystem, the second one is process, and the third one, we call that pain or gain. That's the third type.
Pain or gain.
Yeah.
Or comparison.
Yeah, or a comparison. And do you find, while we're talking about understanding story, do you find that people may, when you talk about story, people get it instantly and they see its power, or are there some misconceptions and myths that you come across when you use that word? What do people tend to misunderstand about story?
Well, it's a good question. It carries different meanings for different people. Some go back to their childhood of somebody telling them a story. Other ones are storytellers, and they want to demonstrate it in acting or performing or speaking, etc. And they're quick to grab the baton to be the lead in it. But for us, story is about understanding that there's a setup at the beginning, like it was a dark and stormy night, and it's we call it a stubby pencil. Founder of the former company I was in, named Dave Gray, had these where if you take your fingers and make 2 V's and put them together, you can imagine a stubby pencil with a pointy end on each side.
Right.
And so whether you're playing a football or soccer match, or whether you're telling a story, it opens up and you start introducing it. And in the middle, in the thick part, is where you get into the complications or the challenges or the issues. And then you have to draw it to a close and figure out how you tell the story of Little Red Riding Hood, who had the complication with the wolf and the grandma, and whatever. And then now we need to bring it to an end. The woodsman came there and chopped up the wolf and got the grandmother, whatever it is. And so you bring it to a close. So there are story arcs and pivots that we need to put forward so that people appreciate it, understand it otherwise. And some people are not visual learners at all, so they would rather read it. They're more analytical. And so your story has to be well crafted with words then. And sometimes it's a combination of both. The right labels, the right words, and then the right cadence, and the right path, and the right emphasis where it's like going on a journey. You go across a highway. When do you go over the bridge? I've got to go up a mountain. When do I come back down? When do I sleep and stop? When do I restart? When do I get fuel? When do I get food? All of that. And you have to figure out where you put those spark lines in your story so it doesn't take too long.
Very
I don't know if that
cool.
answered your question, but
yeah, I think there's something in there around people, I guess, not really knowing story as a tool, and
right.
you're describing how effectively it can be a tool, and how you can use it as a way to resolve these complications, and to show people where the end can be. So,
yes.
yeah, I think
And you know that, I don't know if you know Kotter, who's kind of the godfather
change methodology.
Of change
Yes.
Right. And, in there where if you don't, he says you need to communicate and communicate and communicate and communicate. And that is a part of making sure that the people that you want to adopt something or change or do differently, they have to know why, what's in it for them. There has to be a compelling reason. They have to be given communication so they know when it's going to start, how it's going to affect them, where do they get involved, how do they know if it's doing a good job and if it's getting there, etc. All of those things are a part of the story. They're part of communicating.
That's great.
And change fails when you don't do that.
And that's a really clear application for this, isn't it? Is that, I think there's some applications in what you're saying in terms of sales and customer engagement, marketing. There's certainly internally a huge application in change. And so where I guess we could see that being necessary now is that a lot of organizations are on this transformation to being more effective hybrid employers, to having their people be some degree of remote some of the time. And so it'd be really nice to just play that out a little bit and think, how could this story and this visual thinking help solve some of those hybrid workplace challenges?
That's a good point.
Thoughts you have there, and some of the things, certainly there's a system change, there's an organisation level change that's needed to really plan hybrid work well, and I think that's where there's a need for change. But then down at that team level as well, there's challenges sometimes with getting everyone involved in planning ideas, or even the ideation process itself, and finding new solutions to things, and certainly navigating change and helping people align with new initiatives, even at that team level. Does that spark any thoughts for you?
It does. It's absolutely critical. Although we don't specialize in leadership training or mentoring or otherwise, we partner with some organizations that, one called All-Star Teams, for example, that says you need to understand your core strengths and your personality. It's an assessment that you take, but that has a massive impact on how you receive information and your understanding, and how you communicate, and how you prefer for those things to happen. And when you're working as a team, especially more difficult remotely and using Zoom or Google Meets or whatever Teams, understanding how people deal with stress or deal with planning or deal with ideation, and some are natural and easy going, and other ones it's very difficult to get there. So having a way to at least understand your teammates so you can give grace, support, help them be better at the areas that they're very strong in, and that they have the right role and things to do in the team, with a team. And I'm sure you've experienced this. We found that there's probably more. When we first started with it, COVID, and having to do everything via video, people didn't know how to manage home and manage screen and manage work at the same time. And I think we've gotten a better cadence and understanding. We're comfortable with it. And now we need to learn how can we do some of the more advanced things that require what you were talking about, that require collaboration and co-creation and ideation and working together. And there are technology tools that help a lot, but then there's the human factor we were just talking about that really helps too.
Yeah, that's it, and that's something we could get into that whole AI conversation, but it's essentially it's a thing. But really, ultimately, what is it about humans that if we're connecting with humans, we need to engage humans on something. that story really gets to the heart of what it means to be human and to communicate in a human way. And something I remember learning at university, that every culture has narrative. Every culture uses story.
They do. Yeah. They do. It is how we get our mores, our cultural patterns that we do. It is the very definition of culture is the things you do over time and the commitments you make with others, not just yourself. And that interaction is all tied to what you were saying, the cultural elements of it and the stories we share and that we tell together.
Yeah. You've said it so well. That's so true, that the stories really reinforce those mores or give people ideas about how they're going to deal with things, and it's a great definition of culture. I like that one. And thank you for that. And so we're also talking about hybrid work, remote work. You've co-founded something called the Working Forward movement, and it looks like you're really rethinking, how do we work now? What do we need, and what does the world need from us in terms of an effective way of working? So, what is the Working Forward movement, and what are you achieving with that?
Well, Work Forward was, it was before the pandemic, with a friend of mine, Jim Kalbach from the company Mural, and Great. We were having a beer or coffee, I don't remember, in New York City. I said, I'm really tired of organizations who are saying, the future of work is this or this or this or this, and really they have their own agenda. Whether it was a furniture company saying, you just need the right bits of furniture, or whether it was Microsoft saying, you just need Teams, or Mural themselves saying, you just need digital whiteboard. And the answer is, you're all pretty children, but it's integration of that. And so we thought, should we get a bunch of people together to talk about work, and what can we do to make work better? And so the objective was a bunch of smart people start talking about it and trying to get a language, a tent under which we can all operate, where we can agree this is how we look at work, and how do we assess it and try to figure out a way to make it better. And that was about 3 years ago. And since then, we've gotten, hundreds of people have come in. It's an open source community that is just starting the conversations. We've built a small assessment, and we have a resource library, and we're having events and remote events. We're going to have a live in-person summit for the first time ever in 2023, early 23. And it really is 100% about how do we make work better. When we started it, in the very first little meeting, you had to start with, so what is work? How do we define it? We came up with, it's personal and it's human, and people describing it's all the way from like Maslow's hierarchy. Some people work for money, some work for passion, some work for engagement or doing good, and that means they will do different jobs and want to do things differently. And then we said, then what are the things that are used when you work? And we got into when do you work? How do you work? What do you need to work? So that it had all those areas of the who, where, what, why, and it's different at every business, whatever it is, whether you're building houses or a dairy farmer or you're an imagination worker, but you do some of the same things. You'll do planning, you'll maybe make something, you'll communicate with others. So we got the why do you work, what are the things you do when you work, and then we started describing what would it look like if it was great, if it was perfect. In other words, you land on the planet Zytar, and they are doing work forward in a perfect way. And then we said, so what are they doing? And we came up with definitions of that. So that's how it all started, and now we are just trying to bring more people into it so that they have, for example, there's a small tool you can take as an activity and bring it into your team and say, let's talk about work, because I think this place sucks, or I think we could be better. And it gives it a framework for having the conversation, so that then you could get to other teams or to the leadership or whatever and say, I think we should change this or this or this. We don't have the right technology. We don't have the right resources. We're working in the wrong time space. I don't think we collaborate at all. Our planning is terrible, et cetera, et cetera. So just gives you a framework to work from.
So needed. Absolutely. This is really central to the challenge. And I've described it like, four blindfolded people around an elephant. They'll see it in different ways, right?
Spot on.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
That's great.
It is that. So this tries to give us the language so we can all take our blindfolds off or turn the lights on and have the conversation.
And that framework that you mentioned, is there a way people could access that so they could take those, take that and use those for those conversations? Yeah.
They can go to workforward.co, and go to there's a tab for resources, and on there are a whole set of tools you can click on. There are tools for, sitting and working with your team. There are articles to read. And then there are some of the just resources that you can tap on that we created. So you can see that visualization of the Work Forward approach poster, so you get what we were just talking about. And when we first started, the very first summit that we had, what did we talk about? How did we get there? We made a manifesto, all that stuff. So it's all on that website. You could go.
Amazing. And when you think about the last 3 years in that journey, are there any inspiring examples that have popped up in terms of how a business or of any type has kind of taken these ideas and applied them? Are there any?
We've seen small little sparks of people taking the tools and then writing back to us that was really helpful. And at my business now, we've started a campaign to do this, or I've convinced my boss that we need to do these 3 things, and it was because of that tool that you had. Great. Or a few people just writing in, I need more information about culture and things like that. And we have some of those just starting to, because it's all, open source community. It's, a few people contribute here and there. So we're trying to grow it, trying to get to where we'll have some corporate sponsors, so we can then have some staff and then have, interns doing some of the work and keep it moving forward, because we all want to see if we can have our workplace and our work environment be a little bit better.
Absolutely. So that's workforward.co. That's really helpful, and under the resources section. And also your book, which we haven't really had time to dive into too much, but The Art of Opportunity, How to Build Growth and Ventures Through Strategic Innovation and Visual Thinking, sounds like it's really getting to the heart of how we can grow in the modern world as a business, and using the power of this communication method that you're talking about. So where can people get access to the book?
Most booksellers, I usually tell people just go to that big old store, Amazon.
Yeah, great.
Yep, and they can get it there.
Yeah.
It was published by Wiley, and it's really like a playbook. We didn't want to write a textbook, and it really comes with concepts and ideas for how to approach your customers, understand them, or we call it a customer and non-customer, and establish what is really their motivation for purchasing or buying any service or product, and how do you find that and find where you add value in their journey, find their job to be done, and then go through, and then we have, just like I was mentioning for Work Forward, we have activities that you can do along the way. And part of it is we practice what we preach. We say, this is not to be done by one person. The way to achieve it, and we have it in the book, are these key principles I call business design thinking principles that are co-creation and collaboration and iteration and human-centered design and having a systems approach, and then creativity and storytelling are in there. And when you apply those, you do it, and team-based is part of that, you get better outcomes. And that is, you can see hand in glove, it kind of fits with a work forward mantra. But the using a team, so you work together and you look at people like anthropologically, what are they trying to accomplish? What are they really trying to do? Is it emotional or psychological or functional? And then figure out how you add value, and you go through that process, but you do it together with a team, so you can find ahas, test out ideas, get assumptions, and then how do you get from the concept to the prototyping to the testing it out to the launching the business, and it goes through the whole set of cycles that way.
Excellent.
So it was fun. It took a year of my life, right?
Yeah. That's what people say when they write a book. It's always bigger and gnarlier and more chunky than you think it's going to be.
That's exactly right. And there were 3 of us doing it. I was able to take a year off and do it that way, and the other guys were working at the same time.
Wow.
Oh my God, all hours. But it's a labor of love. When somebody says they want to write a book, I always say, why?
Yeah, let's start with the why. I love it.
Start with the why. Let's make sure you're doing it for the right reason.
Very good. Any final thoughts before we say thank you and wrap up?
Well, thanks. Nina, it's been great speaking with you, and I think you gave me a chance to bring forward, my passions, what I think really matters, not only for us individually, but as humans and in teams and in our work environment. And I always ask the people that I work with, have passion in what you do, be a team member, and make your goals and tasks to get them done every day. And if you're not waking up just bounding out of bed because you can't wait to do what you're doing, then you're doing the wrong thing.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, that's so true.
I know you're doing what you're passionate about.
I really am, exactly. It's all about making work better. Like you said, if we can make our work a better experience, then and if we can make it great, it is something you want to jump out of bed for. And I have struggled for years to re-find this quote, but there's a gorgeous quote out there that work is an anesthetic, it's a stimulant, it's just a list of all the things that you could kind of need at any point in time. Great work can be the catalyst for wonderful things in someone's life as well. So
it truly can. So, and we spend so much of our life doing it.
We do.
It sure better be fun.
It's better be fun. I agree with you. It's there better at least be some fun in it. And there's all these little bits of admin and things to do, but you better. Life's too short to not just ask these questions that can improve it. So
well put.
You've given us so much. You've done an amazing amount of work here with the book and with the Work Forward movement to really clarify for people where their thinking could be at to make work better, and to implement the power of story, to bring the power of story to life. And we've touched on all kinds of things today, from storytelling for leadership to understanding the differences between people and how people learn, to the mechanics of story and what makes it work, and then all the incredible resources available in your Work Forward movement. So I am just so grateful that we've had the conversation. Thank you, Parker.
It's been great. Thank you. I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to chat, to meet, and look forward to collaborating with you further.